So I think we've all heard the phrase, all that matters is a healthy mom and a healthy baby. But that statement assumes way too much, doesn't it? See, when we say all that matters is a healthy mom and a healthy baby, what we mean is all that matters is that both of you are alive. But there's more to birth than that, isn't there? If your birth causes you to look back with regret or guilt or anger, are you really healthy? If your birth is a source of trauma that causes you nightmares and flashbacks and disordered thinking, is that really healthy? I don't think so. If by healthy you mean alive, sure, mom and baby are alive, but that's not health. So why do we gaslight people like that? Why do we, pretend like everything's fine when it's not? If you have an idea in your mind and you have planned and prepared and dreamt of this day and something awful happens, why do we pretend like it didn't? I want to look today at really how this happens and how we can make it better and how we can deal with it once it happens. And there are really two ways in which people lose their birth experience, if you want to put it in broad categories. The first one is when life just conspires against us. And this, man, it seems like this has happened to my clients a lot lately, where we have one idea of what we want their birth experience to look like. And we have sat in the office and we've come up with a birth plan and we've talked about it and we've prepared for it. And then, boom, something just makes what we wanted not happen. And we couldn't have foreseen it. We couldn't have prevented it. It just happens. And that's life. That broad category, that's terrible. And we hate it when that happens. But those are the things from which we can recover fairly well if handled correctly. The second broad category is when hospitals or providers take the birth experience you wanted away from you. And it didn't have to happen, but it happened. And it happened because somebody took it from you. That's very different. So let's look at scenario one. So you've planned and dreamt of this day. You have done all of the classes and you've read all the books and you've looked at all the YouTube videos and you are ready. You're going to have an unmedicated water birth. It's going to be beautiful. And then boom, before labor, you find out you have gestational diabetes or you have hypertension or preeclampsia. And these might change the way your birth has to look because now all of a sudden you're getting induced and it was not in our plan. Or, you have to be on continuous monitoring or blood sugar monitoring, or you need an IV medically. And keep in mind, you don't surrender your autonomy. So these are the things that end up happening, but we don't present them like, you have to do this. We present them like, at this point, it's really not safe to proceed with the exact way we wanted to do your birth. And I would recommend doing this other thing instead. And please know, if this is happening to you and you're my client, I am just as sad about it as you are if this is happening, but we still don't make you do stuff. But let's just say that, something happened like that and now your birth has to look different than we wanted it to. Or during labor, things come up, right? Baby's heart rate doesn't look so great on the monitor. Or, our pain control plan is not working. Or, something goes really wrong and we end up in the operating room doing an unplanned C-section. But those are things that we didn't plan for, we didn't want, but we understand, okay, these things can happen. And certainly after delivery, things happen too, right? You could have a postpartum hemorrhage, or, you could have a retained placenta that requires removal manually. All sorts of things. Your blood pressure could spike after delivery and you thought you were going to go home within a few hours and now you're there for a few days. These are all things that we can't necessarily prevent, but communication and support and compassion, imagine that. And most important of all, preserving your client's autonomy. These things, they can be better if you keep those in mind. If you want to really make these better for your clients, if you are the client, and you're experiencing these things, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's better if your provider can come to you and say very clearly, this is what's happening, this is why this is important, this is what I recommend we do about it, these are the risks, benefits, and alternatives. Please tell me what your decision would be. And by the way, I am so sorry because I know this meant something to you. And now we have to make other plans. Isn't that better than no communication, people just doing stuff, and now all of a sudden what you wanted to happen isn't happening and you don't know why? I think it is. But let's look at scenario 2. Scenario 2 is when providers or hospitals, they just rob you of the birth experience that you wanted, right? This is where the worst trauma can happen in a birth. So, like we mentioned just a minute ago, you have these things that happen, they're unforeseen, and not having compassion, not having respect for your autonomy, that can be extraordinarily traumatizing. But what about things that don't necessarily happen on their own? What about things people do to you? What about hospitals that say, I don't care what you want, you have to have an IV? Or, you know what, everybody is on continuous monitoring here, no matter what. And no, we don't allow you to get in the water. I've heard that before. Or hospitals that say, I'm sorry, we just don't do VBACs here. Or you have to push on your back. In fact, everybody pushes on their back. Get the stirrups out, we're going to break down the bed, this is how we do it here. No autonomy, no compassion, no choice. That can be traumatizing. Or what about provider-driven things? Maybe your hospital does do VBACs, but the doctor that's on that day says, I'm sorry, I don't do VBACs. And maybe even ridicules you for wanting to. And now you're forced to make a choice. You can walk out against medical advice, or you can consent to a C-section where there really is no consenting because there's no choice. What about a doctor that does a episiotomy, on everybody? I've worked with them. I've wanted to slap scissors out of people's hands so badly, but those providers are out there. What about docs that don't give you choices in terms of what position you're going to push in, or they just don't get consent before they touch you? I've seen so many providers walk into a room and just put their hands inside people without even talking to them, let alone asking, is it okay if I touch? Or what about the providers that just make rude and condescending comments, taking what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of your life and turning it into an experience where you felt belittled and you felt to be made small and insignificant and you felt victimized instead of supported? Those are things providers do, and they can be incredibly traumatizing. So what can you do if you've been traumatized, if you've lost your birth experience, the birth experience that you've dreamt of, that you've planned for, that you've saved money for, that you've invested a year of your life getting ready for? What can you do? Well, first of all, if you're the client, you need to find a provider who's going to listen to your birth story, who's going to listen to the ways in which you suffered trauma, and who's going to swear they're going to do everything in their power to do better this time. Second of all, don't let anybody minimize what you've lost. Don't let people tell you, well, at least you're healthy, baby's healthy, everybody's fine, you really need to get over it. No. They don't get to tell you that. Only you get to decide whether or not you're fine. And obviously you're not if you're grieving the loss of what you wanted in your birth and what you needed deep down in your soul to happen and what was taken from you. You're not fine. Also, don't be afraid to grieve what you've lost. Take the time to mourn, to let people know you're not okay. Get help. Talk to a counselor, talk to a friend, talk to your midwife. Really, that's why we're here. And the next birth, if you can, get a doula. Hire somebody to be there to advocate for you. And one of the questions that you need to ask this person when you're interviewing them is, tell me how you advocate for my rights and my preferences. Because that is a huge part of their job. And I'll tell you right now, as the provider in the room, When I see that someone has a doula, I just want to run up and hug them and say, thank you for being here and helping me defend the rights of this person that we both work for today. If your provider doesn't like doulas, get a new one. Seriously, just walk out if you can. I realize some people can't. Some people live in a place where there's just one place to go and one person to go to. If that's your situation, I am sorry. But here in the Puget Sound area, that is not our situation. There are doctors and midwives everywhere. Find one who's going to work with you and with your doula if you can have one. And lastly, please, don't be afraid to file a complaint. Every state, every hospital has someone that you complain to. Every hospital has a compliance officer or a risk manager, they might call them, or a patient experience officer, whatever they call them. Find out who that person is and talk with them. And if you don't get all of the answers that you want there, you keep going. You talk to the State Board of Medicine, the State Board of Nursing, whoever it is you need to talk to. Go to Birth Monopoly. Their website is fantastic. They actually have a section that explains how to file a complaint. It is wonderful. It is a great tool to use, and I highly encourage you to use that. Providers, please listen. Listen to your clients. Listen to their doulas. Listen to their families. And always ask, is this what you want? Always ask, am I doing what you've hired me to do? And if not, how can I do better? Please, our clients deserve better than what they've been getting. And I know we can give it to them.